Tracy O'Rourke. I am an instructor for the Green Belt program here at UCSD. I've been an instructor for like 10 years now, but I've been doing process improvement for 25 years. I absolutely love it. I'm a self-proclaimed process improvement zealot. And how many of you heard of Lean Six Sigma before? Okay, how many of you only just found out about it like a year ago? Okay, good. How many of you thought this was a karate class? So anyway, that's something, we sometimes get that, right? Like, oh, you're a black belt in karate? No. So anyway, love this stuff. My hope is to just spread the good word and make everybody process improvement zealots. And so Jim, why don't you tell them a little bit about you?
I'm Jim Athon. I am the black belt instructor here at the college. I've been teaching here for 3 years now. I've been involved in Lean Six Sigma since last century. Kind of sad when you hear that. I got actually trained by the Motorola people that came out of Motorola when they first started spreading that out from the Six Sigma originated in Motorola. So I've been at it for a while, have really been excited about working with the black belts here. The thing that got me was the first class we did, we had 100% graduation rate. I've been teaching for 20 some odd years, and I have never had 100% of the students graduate ever. And we've had like 3 classes like that. So it's just phenomenal. People are finishing their projects, they're saving a great deal of money, they're making major impact in the business. So I'm just excited to be here.
This is basic introduction to process improvement, Lean Six Sigma. What's with the belts? People always ask us that. White belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and it's not karate. And that's really what this session is about, is just to kind of walk through that. Let's talk about what it does and what the purpose of Lean Six Sigma is. And really, I like to start with process, right? Everything we do, everything is a process. Everything. A series of steps to get something done or to deliver a product or service. Going to the airport is a process. Baking a cake is a process. Cooking is a process. Also, going to get your lunch. Every day, you're experiencing a process. Either you work in a process or you're in a process. Now, how many of you have had bad experiences with process or process flow, right? I mean, we see this every day, right? So sometimes we're a defect in somebody's process, right? You go to Starbucks and they didn't get your coffee order right. You go to McDonald's and you ordered a cheeseburger with no cheese. Just kidding. So, you don't get what you want. Or there's flow issues, right? So I have to say, I went on a vacation this summer. I went on a Royal Caribbean cruise. Anybody been on a Royal Caribbean cruise? Okay, for a process person, I was pretty impressed with how they handle flow of 5,500 people getting off the ship for a destination and getting back on the ship. They really think about process, and they should, because they're having 5,500 people come into their boat every week, right? These are repeatable processes. So I was really impressed, but we are also astounded sometimes by how bad process is, right? And guess what? So how many of you work in manufacturing? Anyone? Okay, so a lot of people think this only applies to manufacturing, but it doesn't. I've been doing this 20 plus years, and there are processes that are service processes. And guess what's challenging about service processes? They're invisible, right? Think about it. Can you go in a room and go, oh my God, that employee onboarding process is horrible? You can't see it. You only know by the pain people go through that either work in the process or have to go through the process. How many of you guys had a great experience getting onboarded by your employer? Anyone? Good. That is one of the #1 processes we see people coming to work on in these classes, because it's painful. It's, in 2 weeks, you need to involve 16 different departments, and there's all these requirements, and if something goes wrong, they don't have their laptop on day 1, right? So that's what we mean by process. If you start to really think about the things you have to experience on a day-to-day basis when you go to the store, when you go to the bank, or when you're at work, everything is a process. And guess what? Sometimes processes feel like this, right? Painful, right? How many of you feel like you work in a process that's designed like this? How many of you guys saw that movie Utopia? Is it Utopia, where the DMV worker's a sloth? How'd you like to go to that movie with your kid and you work at the DMV and you're like, yeah, that's me? Wouldn't that be awful, right? So bad experience, right? And we're going to yell at the DMV worker because they work in a process like this. They're a victim. They're a victim of this process. They're not the cause, right? And we're yelling at them. So the whole idea behind process improvement and Lean Six Sigma is you are really looking to streamline this, make it simpler. But guess what? It's not like you can see it. Like we said, it's invisible. How many of you guys work in invisible processes? You can't see the process in a room. Yeah. So our first challenge is we have to make the process visible. Then we make the problems visible in the process, right? And guess what? When you do that, when you start to show people a map of the process, they start pointing at the map and they stop pointing at each other. It's kind of an interesting dynamic. Watch for it. You would think by now that every process we work in is perfect. Is that true? No. I don't know why. There's lots of processes. Even with AI, this will never become obsolete because we still need to improve processes. So if you're on this journey or thinking about embarking on a process improvement journey, I'd say go for it because it will never be obsolete. You will always need to think about flow and process.
Tracy was making a point about the people in the DMV, they're working in a process. They see it's broken. They know it's ridiculous. They have to put on a barrier to protect themselves against the angry citizen who just wants their driver's license. They don't have a chance to work on the process. And that's what Lean Sigma is all about. It's extracting yourself from the process so that you can look at the whole and actually start making changes. So we hate to use the cliche terms like empowerment, but we are literally empowering a team of people with the expertise to go and change a process and make it better. The ultimate idea being improve the process and then standardize it. The problem we often run into is we'll improve a process, everybody walks away and it goes right back to what it was. Right? So our goal is to improve the process and keep it fixed. Now, we're using tools. We're using two different tool sets, the Lean tool set and the Six Sigma tool set. And so this idea of Lean has its origin in the automotive assembly. They used to take a car and everybody would walk to the car and work on it. They came up with the idea of moving the car from department to department. And then Ransom Olds, the Oldsmobile, right, came up with the idea of moving the car gradually into each department. Well, the Ford guys got together and figured out they literally put a car on a rope and pulled it through very slowly, and everybody worked on it. They cut the cycle time by 75% and the labor time by 50% because they got rid of waste. Lean is all about waste. In fact, Lean, you could really summarize Lean in saying cycle time is increased by waste or non-value-added activity. So people will say that Lean is a constant search for waste. Actually, it's a constant search to figure out how to shorten the cycle time. So we always talk about this idea of the end-to-end cycle time or the ring-to-ring cycle time, from when the telephone rings with an order to the customer the cash register rings with our money. And Tracy was making the point, in manufacturing, you could walk through the process and see the gradual transformation of raw material to finished goods. And most anybody, you've seen How It's Made, right? The TV show, and they'll show how they make donuts or how they make airplane engines. You can walk, but when you go see invisible processes, there's nothing to see. Well, first I go to this screen, and then I print this out, and then I go get it signed, and then I scan it in, and then I log it into this system, and then I make sure I make a double copy, and it goes on and on. And so Tracy's point is, we make a physical process map, and we begin to understand the process. And as she pointed out so eloquently, we keep pointing our fingers at each other and start looking at the process. The vast majority of problems are caused by processes that have not been thought out. But what consequently leads from that? Most processes haven't been thought out. They're usually put together in a rush, and we just kind of get it together so it works without thinking through the impact on cycle time. Six Sigma, on the other hand, was all about defects. And the whole concept behind that is that variation in processes, variation in raw material, variation in our adherence to an SOP, variation in which process SOP people are using, all lead to defects. So the goal is to understand the variation and control it or eliminate it, and consequently reduce the defects. Right? The way they work together is identifying things like inspection. Why do we inspect? Because we expect to find defects. If we never found defects, we'd stop inspecting. So Lean and Six Sigma work together to eliminate these non-value-added activities. Rework as well, right? So the ultimate goal is to achieve maximum customer value, right? Where they get the most for the least amount of pay.
How many of you travel by plane? Okay. Now, how many of you feel pretty confident that you're going to get to your destination alive? you will have a 99.9997% chance of making it to your destination alive. Actually, it's better than that, right? So very little chance that you're not going to make it, which is great. So you should feel good about getting on a plane and arriving alive if you didn't before. So that is actually better than Six Sigma, you arriving alive. Your luggage, on the other hand, is not Six Sigma. It's lower than Six Sigma. How many of you have had a bad experience losing your luggage? Okay, and I'll define that defect. It didn't show up at the same time as you, right? So that would be a defect, right? Or you never got it, or it arrived 2 days later. Okay, so we've had bad experiences with that, right? That is much lower, we call it 3 Sigma, roughly 3 Sigma, which means they're losing about 70,000 bags per million, which is still pretty good, right? But that gives you a feel for the difference between 6 Sigma process, really high level, high quality, and 3 Sigma process, right? Not very good, right? So that's what we mean by quality, right? We're looking to try to maximize or reduce variation. Thankfully, they didn't get those mixed up, because that would be really a real bummer if your luggage showed up but you didn't, right?
We're looking at several aspects, and when we're working on any process, we're trying to do one of 4 things: make it better, faster, safer, or lower cost, right? So when we start increasing efficiency, that means we can do more with less resources, less human resources, less computer resources, less raw materials, and so forth. We want to reduce the cost of poor quality. The cost of poor quality, COPQ is this acronym we'll use, is basically the cost of not doing it right the first time. All the inspection, all the rework, all the extra handling, all the redundancies that we have, right? We want to ultimately improve the customer experience. Both we talk about 2 different ways they experience us. The output, what they receive, the thingamabob they get, and the service, how we go about giving that. So in a hospital, the outcome is they make it out of the hospital alive, right? They are healed from their malady, or at least on the road, and they don't get a hospital-acquired infection, right? So you look at, that's all the output. But the other thing is bedside manner. That's the service portion. You can do a really good job with the one and do a terrible job with the other, and people will find another hospital to use, right? So it's interesting. We have to look at both of those items in customer experience. And then also, it ultimately strengthens the organization. Our goal is to build an entire organization of problem solvers. And empowered problem solvers, so they can fix their own problems, right? And then turn that into the SOP, or the standard operating procedures that we use to run our business.
Yes, and also these are the belt levels. It does actually come from karate, right? So it follows the higher the belt, or the different colors are associated with different levels of knowledge. And so in this case with Six Sigma, you're not necessarily doing a karate kick, but you are cutting through waste. Go ahead, you do the kick. I'm not gonna do the kick, I'll just use the arms. You do the kick. So, but I will say that, again, what we're learning and what we're trying to get you guys to learn is you're not working in the process, you're working on the process. So just as Jim said, you step out of the process to analyze it. That's what you're learning in this class. You're learning how to analyze a process, find the root causes that are related to how the process is set up, and you're looking to fix and improve and streamline that. For example, you might have 6 different approvals. Why do we have 6 different approvals in this process? Oh, and 4 times it's the same person. Why? Right? So these are the things we start to look at, right? And so that's what we're doing is the higher the level, the more equipped you are to do process improvement, analyze the process. And then, sometimes we start out individually, we're trying to get better at the knowledge, and then you're working towards teams, right? And as a black belt, you're doing black belt projects, but you're also coaching teams. You can be coaching teams as a part of that.
It actually does tie back to the idea of martial arts, where you get a white belt, you're a beginner, and you gradually work your way up. But in the original concept that came out of Motorola, the idea of a black belt was someone that was highly trained in problem-solving skills. They don't have to know, oddly enough, they don't have to know much about the process they're going to go work on. They have to know the tools, because it's always about the process. And you can rely on subject matter experts to bring the expertise of the specific process itself. But they were to use the tools. Now, when we start off, our first projects are always working in your own environment. So you're not struggling to learn a new process as well as learning new tools. So the green belts and the black belts are always working on projects in their own area where they have some level of expertise and they can pull on their colleagues. But the ultimate goal of a black belt or a master black belt is you get so good with the tools, you can handle any project that's handed to you, right? Because you're an expert in the problem-solving tools, not necessarily all the processes. Good.
Yes. Also, what I'd like to say is you're going to learn as you go through these different belts, yellow belt, green belt, black belt. Now, some people think, well, why do we have to have the belts? Some people don't like the belts. I actually like the belts because it's kind of systematic. It gives people some direction. It's pretty organized, generally introductory level to more expertise. And you're building that expertise. It gives people a path so that they kind of have a good understanding. Even the projects are kind of outlined like what you should be able to do with those new skills. And you know what's even cooler is you get to apply this stuff at home, right? So it's not, this is, process, we have processes at home too. You got 2 kids and you're trying to figure out how to get out of the house quicker. Instead of like yelling, put your shoes on, or, where's your underwear? Did you eat your breakfast? And so these are things you can say, let's look at this process a little more closely. First, drink my coffee. Second, what should be the next step here? And then, like we've seen some great people, they're applying stuff at home. They're like, okay, this is how I do it with my daughter because she's very picky about what she wants to wear. And so now we do it on Sunday for the whole week. And I have little cubbies for each section. And my morning is so much better, right? This is like, you could do this at home. Processes at home too, leaving the house. Cooking, having a party, whatever it is, you can apply this stuff. And so how many of you feel like you already have this like process efficiency? Like, things bug me all the time. I'm always trying to look at processes. How many of you guys feel like you have that already? Yeah, so that's great. That's probably why they're here. So white belt and yellow belt, these are levels that are introductory and they're kind of optional, right? So you don't always have to start with white belt. If you have to go into green belt. So if you do green belt, it covers white belt and yellow belt. But often people are offering levels because that's how they want to train their people, right? They want to give people goals of like, get the white belt, get the yellow belt, then go to green belt. But with UCSD's programs, the public programs, you can go right into green belt and you're going to get the yellow belt and the white belt knowledge. Black belts, you do need a green belt unless you take the combo class that Jim offers, which is green and black belt together. And so usually that is a requirement. Okay, so yellow belt, there's 3 different options. There's UCSD staff trained. It's by OSI, it's internal. Green belt, these are people who really want to apply DMAIC. So more robust in terms of application, working with teams, getting that experience, a little bit of change management, no prerequisite required. And these are like some of the topics you would learn. So our green belt is 40 hours roughly, 5 days. We have lots of different options. You could do fully in person. You could do hybrid, which is online with a live instructor, or you could do completely asynchronous, right? So lots of modalities now. And it does follow DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, which is like a root cause methodology. The projects that you do in Greenbelt start with a problem. A lot of people sometimes come with a solution. They say, I want to implement the software. Can I use DMAIC for that? No. This is problem-solving method. It's root cause analysis. So guess what? You come with a problem and you don't know why the problem's occurring. And you use the method to figure out why the problem is happening. And then you can implement a solution. So it's like a forced 3-step process before you implement a solution. But we're so used to implementing and jumping to solution that we sometimes skip all those steps. So this method is really saying, okay, don't jump to solution because you may not know really what the problem is or the root cause. So that's really what define and measure and analyze are. You can see there's one main question. What is the problem we're trying to solve? That's actually sometimes hard to figure out, right? The problem is accounting won't do their job. Was that really the problem? Sounds like blame to me. So sometimes we have to kind of work through what problem are we really trying to solve, right? And somebody says, well, the problem is we need to automate. Is that a problem? That's a solution.
Searching for a problem.
It's a solution, searching for a problem. So then we have to really think about what is the problem you're trying to solve? Oh, the problem is too many manual steps. And there's a lot of time being wasted. That's really the problem. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean automation will solve that, because we've seen automation actually make processes worse sometimes. Right? So what is the problem? How bad is it? And what are the root causes? And you can see that you're spending a lot of time here. But often people jump from problem to solution. And we're really trying to hold people back, like, no, learn this method. Now, here's the thing. So this is very specific application. So when you come into the class, we're really listening intently to what your project is, because you have a project for these classes, because we want you to be successful, and we want you to pick a project that you can apply this method. Now, there are a lot of problems out there. You've seen this before. You've worked at this job for 10 years. You've seen this problem before. You know how to solve it. Then you don't need it for that problem. Don't waste your time, because you're not going to see value in applying it. And so knowing what the approach should be is a very important thing you learn in this class is, oh, yeah, actually, DMAIC wouldn't apply here, but I really need it for these 3 things. And that's really important, because we see people using the wrong methods many times. Did you want to add anything to that?
If you come into a problem with a known root cause, you are likely to fall prey to something called confirmation bias. A lot of us have looked that up. Confirmation bias is basically you accept data that supports what you already believe, and you reject data that contradicts what you believe. If you've already made up your mind with the root cause, your pride gets involved. And now it's like you're only looking for data, and it's difficult to let go, right? The same with coming in with a known solution. I see this a lot. People will come in with we have to implement this because it's a manager's pet project, and they're going to use this as a vehicle to get their pet project done. So we push back on both of those and say, let's go back and make sure we understand what is the actual problem. Just as a side note, and I only give you this insight because of the history I had, when DMAIC first came out of Motorola, it was just MAIC. There was no define. Motorola had built such a strong culture around identifying problems and having good metrics in place. They already knew what their issues were, and then they directed people to go solve them. You know what we discovered when we got out of Motorola and started working in industry? Most businesses don't do a good job of defining problems. They identify solutions, they throw solutions, they pick big things they're going to do, but they don't really do a good job of defining that. So we spend a lot of time up front, it's very front-end loaded, if you will, to make sure people understand what the problem is. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we harp on that saying a lot. Like, make sure you can measure what the problem is.
Tell them a little bit about the combo, because the combo is an option. I mean, you could, if you're like, yes, take me to the next step, you go right into this class. And this is a class that Jim teaches. So why don't you tell them just a little bit about it?
So both methodologies, green belt, black belt, go through the entirety of DMAIC. Even yellow belt goes through the entirety of DMAIC. Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. When we do the green belt, we focus much more on the basic tools, which in fact often are the most powerful tools. The Pareto chart, the process map, the understanding how to put your team together and leverage brainstorming ideas with your team and narrowing those down with straightforward graphical tools. When we get into the black belt, we go much deeper into the statistical side. We get into hypothesis testing, regression analysis, designed experimentation, control charts. So really, one way to look at it is black belt is like green belt on steroids, right? We really go deep into statistical analysis. Fair enough? And so what we do is we start with a 5-week program of green belt where we're actually teaching everything that Tracy's teaching in a condensed period of time with extra, so it's all live, but it's also supplemental videos. And then we get into the black belt for the remaining 6 weeks. And the objective being you're working a black belt level project through the entirety of that course, a single project through the whole course. It's just we're going through the tools and then we come back. The other advantage is you get to hear some of it twice because we covered it in the green belt level, then we covered it at deeper treatment in the black belt level.
And if you don't know what any of these say, you're sure ain't gonna know what any of these are. But it's okay, by the end of black belt, you're gonna know what all these are. So we have lots of options, right? So I teach mostly the green belt. I love the basic tools. I love seeing people, like the light bulb goes on and are like, oh, process and improving it and flow and oh, I'm batching. That's why it's taking longer. I just love that. And so you can do just a green belt, take a break and be thoughtful and think about it and then go the black belt separate. You don't have to necessarily do the combo, but there's lots of options because people learn different and we're trying to listen to our customers and try to provide lots of options. Okay, so but here's what's not an option. You cannot come to this class and not do a project because there is strong evidence to suggest that application while learning is the best way to learn. And so we help you with your project. You come in with projects, and by the time you're done with the class, you're actually completing a project. And so we help you work on scope, we help you work on selection, we help you work on application of the tools, and we get to see all those aha moments along the way, which is awesome. Love it. So it applies everywhere. So that's the other thing. When I am on airplanes or if I'm at a cocktail party and people will say, what do you do? Oh, Lean Six Sigma. What? Well, what industry is that? None. It's all. They think I'm being difficult. No, it's true. This applies in every industry because guess what? Every company has products or services, and there has to be a process to deliver those products or services. So every company has processes, and they're not all working perfectly, right? So that's what this is for. All right, so why UC San Diego? Okay, so this is kind of something important. How many of you have done project management? Okay, so there's a governing body for project management, PMI. They oversee everything. They regulate everything. Well, guess what? No equivalent exists for process improvement. Although some companies want you to believe that they are the governing body, there is no governing body. You know, coming to UCSD, it's not an academic exercise. It is not check the boxes. It is, we want you to be able to apply this stuff when you get out of the class and during the class. It's all about practical application and use. If you aren't using it, we failed. We failed as instructors and we failed as a program. We're not here to just have you check the boxes and say you could be a black belt, but you don't know how to understand a problem statement, right? So that's why you want to come to UCSD, because there's lots of programs out there. You can get the certificate, but you aren't really applying it and learning it. And so that's really what we have really worked hard to bring to people that come to these classes.
One thing to add to that,
yes.
Tracy. Tracy and I have done it for a long time. It's not just an academic exercise for us. I've got a lot of history in a lot of different industries. I know about that much about a lot of different things. But the universal, as we mentioned at the very beginning, the universal is all of these industries are full of processes. And most of those processes have opportunities. And sometimes it's just the basic methodology of doing things like a process map or even a spaghetti chart. You may have heard of a spaghetti chart. Spaghetti chart where they look top down on an entire process and they map how either the product is moving through or the personnel. We've even done spaghetti charts with computer screens. And when you start seeing all the jumping back and forth between computer screens and different software packages, people are like, why are we doing that? We did one, this is crazy. It was a warehouse here in San Diego where they're doing fulfillment for orders online. Everybody knew this and nobody knew this. You ever had those situations where the operators would go out, or the technicians would go out and pull the product off the shelf that the customer would order. They'd get in a box and they'd go at their terminal and type it all up and they'd hit print. But the printer wasn't here. The printer was 100 feet away in an office. Right? So when you show them mapping out, and then the people who are filling the orders, they're smart enough not to print one order at a time, or they'd spend all their time walking. So they'll print 4 or 5 orders at a time. Unfortunately, the shoes in the box may not match the invoice and the label they put on the box, so you're getting a bunch of size 14 basketball shoes, high tops. You're like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted just some low-cut, right? Because you're getting somebody else's order. It was amazing. And once they did the spaghetti chart and presented that to management, it was like, why are we doing that? And everybody's like, that's a good question. But the people who were doing the process every day knew it, but they were so trapped into the process doing it, they quit questioning it. And that happens all the time. So that's what we're doing, is we're extracting ourselves out and working on the process. But you're getting actual, and so Tracy will provide coaching. I provide individual coaching for students as they go through the class to help move them along on their project and apply the right tools at the right time. So
life is complicated. And you need better tools to simplify things. And that's really what this is doing, is simplifying your work, your life, and ultimately you're making lives easier and better. And I've seen some wonderful projects over the years, and I'm sure that Jim has as well. So this is the different options. Again, like I said, you have the different belts. You could do group or private cohorts. You could do online, hybrid, and in-person in terms of modalities. So you have to pick a process, and then you have to pick a problem with that process. And usually they do fall into certain buckets, like it's too slow, the process is too slow, it's taking too long, or something's not working right. We usually say there's some defects happening, but sometimes we can't define those defects very well until we get into class. Right? You have to pick a process. It could be an invisible process, it could be employee onboarding, it could be invoicing, it could be anything you work in. Most of us are working in a process of some kind. We had someone at UCSD that went through a program, and all she did was reporting. She's like, I don't know if I have anything that's really meaningful. Yes, reporting. That's all she did was reporting. And it was her process from start to finish. She walked the process. She analyzed how much time she was spending on the process. And then as a part of it, she went and talked to the customers to these processes. And she discovered that she was spending probably 60% of her time on certain items for certain reports, And when she talked to her customers, they didn't care about those. So she was able to eliminate them. So, and she actually got best in class for that semester, because we do best in class awards too. The commitment you want from your leader is you're going to learn, you're going to grow, and you're learning this new method, and they're going to give you the freedom to apply it. I will tell you that a lot of times, if leaders aren't versed on what this method is, they're going to hand you a solution to implement. They're going to say, implement the software. So you have to do a little bit of education sometimes around what that is. It's a problem to be solved, and then you can bring it into class. So I would always say, come up with a couple ideas so nobody's married to a project idea. And then we usually early on will meet with every single student pretty early to vet their project idea.
And one thing we will ask managers is, what keeps you up at night? What are you really worried about? What is on your plate right now that you're liable to get called out on in a meeting? And then can we craft a project around that? Projects usually fall into one of four very broad categories. Internal issues that you have problems with, internal defects, internal excessive cycle time, internal complaints, internal employee dissatisfaction. External issues where the specific customer is having problems with the quality of the service you're delivered, or their service expectations or output expectations, or even the product itself, or on-time delivery, or any of those sorts of things. Billing issues, accounts receivable issues, right, or accounts payable issues. The third is anytime you're dealing with a higher level business metric around efficiency or customer satisfaction. Sometimes we get those. Press-Ganey scores in a hospital is a good example. They're always wanting to move to the next quartile. So we wind up working projects around how do we improve that. And then last is the ubiquitous other that always fits things like improve your OSHA recordables or internal things that you have. But most of the projects fall in those first two categories, and sometimes the third one.
So this is where Jim's going to get some fans, is if you do the combo class, you only need one project. But if you do green belt,
one long class.
Yes.
But if you get a green belt and wait 6 months and do a black belt, you have to have a new project for black belt.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you're enjoying the conference, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you guys.